All right, so you're thinking about Canada, huh? Maybe you're already picturing yourself like in a big lecture hall at one of those Canadian universities, or you see yourself, like starting a brand new career, a brand new life in one of Canada's really amazing cities.
Yeah, for a lot of people who have those same goals, they run into this one thing, the IELTS. It can feel like a huge step.
Totally. It stands for the International English Language Testing System, right?
That's right.
And that's exactly what we're going to get into today in our deep dive.
And we're going to break it all down for you. We have a really comprehensive resource called IELTS in Canada, your ultimate guide to study and settle. And so we're going to try and make it very, very clear exactly what you need to know about IELTS in Canada and how it can help you achieve your goals.
Okay, so IELTS for Canada. Why is this so important?
Well, the majority of Canadian institutions require an IELTS score for admission. So if you're aiming to study in Canada, you're going to need to know about IELTS.
So it's like a baseline thing that you have to know.
Yeah, it's their way of making sure that students who are coming from other countries have the language skills they need to succeed.
Right, so you can
Okay,
participate in class.
exactly. You can understand lectures, you can write papers.
Makes sense.
And it's not just for students, though. Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, also known as the IRCC, uses IELTS scores to figure out English proficiency for people who are applying for permanent residence in Canada.
So it covers a lot of areas.
It does. It covers a lot of areas.
So it's not just education, it's...
Immigration as well.
Okay. Is there anything else that adds to its importance?
Well, it's super well recognized all over the world, not just within Canada, but internationally. Institutions, employers, immigration authorities all over the globe really accept it.
So it's kind of like a passport to
Exactly.
all of these things.
It is, yeah. So if your plans change down the road, you still have this to support you.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's pretty accessible. There are testing centers all over the world, including in India and across Canada, and you get the results back relatively quickly, about 13 days.
Okay, so efficient as well.
Yes, very efficient.
Awesome. Now, you mentioned different types of IELTS. What types are most important for those focused on Canada?
Right. So if you're planning to go to a university or a college, you need to know about IELTS Academic.
Oh,
That's the one that they use to see if you're ready to study in an academic environment.
so that makes sense.
That makes sense.
It does. What about people who are looking to work or immigrate to Canada?
So for those folks, you want to focus on the IELTS General Training Test. This test focuses on everyday English that you would use in a social setting or in a workplace setting.
Okay, so like day-to-day life.
Exactly.
Right.
This test is accepted for a lot of different immigration programs, including Express Entry.
Okay, I've heard about that.
Have you? Yeah. Express Entry is Canada's main system for managing economic immigration applications.
So it's kind of the main pathway.
It is. It is the main pathway for skilled workers who want to come to Canada. And it's also accepted for provincial nominee programs. And these are programs that are managed by the provinces to attract people who meet specific labor market needs.
Okay.
So it's definitely a very important one to know about if you're looking to immigrate to Canada.
So general training is like the practical day-to-day, and academic is for university.
Exactly.
Are there any other types that we should know about?
There is one other type. It's called IELTS for UKVI.
What does that stand for?
UK Visas and Immigration.
Okay.
This test is specifically for people who are trying to get a visa to go to the UK.
Okay.
So unless you're going to the UK, you don't need to worry about this one.
So kind of ignore that.
You can pretty much ignore it. Yeah, focus on academic or general training.
So now the big question is about the scores. What kind of scores do you need?
All right, well, let's talk about student visas first. The scores needed for a student visa are going to differ depending on if you're applying for undergraduate or postgraduate studies. If you're looking at undergraduate studies, you typically need a score between 6 and 6.5.
Overall.
Overall, yeah.
Got it.
But you also have to meet the minimum score for each band.
What are the bands again?
So the bands are listening, reading, writing, and speaking.
Okay.
Usually you have to get at least a 5.5 in each band.
Oh, so you can't just ace one and bomb the others?
Nope. They want to make sure you're proficient in all areas of English.
That's fair.
For postgraduate programs, the scores are a little higher. You're looking at 6.5 to 7 overall. And the minimum score for each band is usually a 6.
Okay. So those are pretty good scores.
They're good scores, but remember, these are just guidelines.
Right.
You have to check the admissions page of whatever school you're interested in to find out their specific requirements.
So always double check.
Always.
What about for immigration through express entry and permanent residence?
And so for express entry, you have to look at the Federal Skilled Worker Program, or FSWP.
Hmm.
That's one of the main pathways for people who have skilled work experience from outside of Canada.
Okay.
For that program, you need at least a 6 in each of the 4 bands: listening, reading, writing, and speaking.
So consistent.
Yes, very consistent.
What about other immigration pathways like the Canadian Experience Class or the provincial nominee programs?
So for the Canadian Experience Class, that's often called CEC, and that pathway is usually for people who already have skilled work experience in Canada.
Mm.
For that program, you need a score between 5 and 6 in each band, so a
Okay.
little bit lower.
Yeah.
The exact score depends on the type of job you had in Canada.
Okay.
Now, the provincial nominee programs, or PNPs, those can vary a lot from province to province.
How much do they vary?
They can range anywhere from 4 to 6 in each band.
So it really depends on where you want to go.
It really does.
Okay.
So make sure to do your research and find out exactly what score you need for the program you're interested in.
So there's a lot of research involved in all of this.
There is, but it's important research.
So, you need to take the IELTS. You kind of know what scores you might need. So how do you even prepare for it?
Well, you have a few options. One thing you could do is take an online course.
Are those offered by the people who administer the IELTS test?
Yes. Some of them are platforms like the British Council and IDP. They offer courses to help you prepare.
Makes sense.
And there are other online platforms, too, that can help you get ready for the test.
What about practice materials?
Oh, those are essential. You should definitely take practice tests to familiarize yourself with the format of the test and the types of questions you'll be asked.
Where can you find those?
The official IELTS publishers offer sample questions and full practice tests in their books and online.
So you can see what you're getting into
take that.
before you actually do it.
You don't want to be surprised on test day.
Definitely not.
Beyond the practice tests, though, it's important to just practice English in your everyday life.
What do you mean by that?
We'll read English books, newspapers, even academic articles if you're taking the academic test.
Okay.
Watch English language TV shows and movies. Listen to podcasts. All of that helps.
So basically just surround yourself with English as much as possible.
Exactly. The more you practice, the better you'll do on the test.
What about coaching centers? Are those still helpful?
Yeah, coaching centers are still a good option for a lot of people.
What do they offer?
They can provide structured guidance, personalized feedback, and help you identify areas where you need to improve.
So they can give you some more tailored help.
Exactly. And there are coaching centers in India and in Canada.
So if you're listening from either place, there are options for you.
Exactly.
And if you're already in Canada, where can you take the IELTS test?
Pretty much all the major cities have IELTS testing centers. The guide specifically mentions Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary, Ottawa, and Edmonton.
So it's pretty easy to find a location.
It should be.
Where do you go to register for the test?
The easiest way is to go to the official website of either the British Council or IDP.
Yep.
Their websites list all the available test dates and locations. You can pick what works best for you, fill out an application form, and pay the fee online.
And then you're all set?
Then you're all set. You'll get a confirmation with all the details.
Easy enough. What about the cost?
Ah, yes.
Oh.
Well, it does cost money to take the test.
How much does it cost?
In Canada, both the academic and general training tests cost between $339 and $350 Canadian dollars.
Great.
The UKVI test is a little bit more expensive. It's about $385.
Okay.
And something interesting that the guide pointed out is that the cost for the computer-based test is pretty much the same as the paper-based test.
So that's good to know.
It is good to know. Just keep in mind that the prices can vary a little bit depending on the test center.
So always double check.
Always double check.
Now let's talk about some of the challenges that people face when taking the IELTS in Canada. What are some of the most common ones and how can you overcome them?
One thing that people struggle with, especially if they're new to Canada, is understanding Canadian accents in the listening section.
That makes sense.
Yeah, if you haven't been exposed to Canadian English, it can be tough to follow what people are saying.
So what can you do about it?
Just listen to as much Canadian English as you can. Watch Canadian TV and movies, listen to Canadian radio and podcasts.
And are there practice tests with Canadian accents?
Yes, you can find those too.
So just immerse yourself in Canadian English.
Exactly.
What's another common challenge?
Another challenge is fear of speaking fluently. A lot of people get nervous during the speaking section, even if their English is pretty good.
It's like stage fright.
It is. It really is.
How can you get over that?
Practice, practice, practice. Join English conversation groups. Find a language partner. Get a tutor. Or just record yourself answering sample speaking questions and then listen back to see how you did.
Okay.
The more comfortable you are speaking English, the better you'll do on the test.
So just keep speaking.
Yes, keep speaking.
Okay. What about vocabulary? Is that something people struggle with?
Yes, especially for the academic test. You need to know a lot of academic vocabulary to do well on that test.
So it's more than just knowing everyday English.
It is, yeah. You need to be able to use more formal and complex language.
How can you improve your vocabulary?
Read a lot of academic articles and newspapers, and try to learn 5 to 10 new words every day.
That's a good goal.
It is.
Oh.
And try to use those new words in your writing and speaking practice.
So make it a part of your routine.
Exactly.
Okay. What about time management? Is that a common challenge?
Oh, yeah. Time management is a big one, especially for the writing section.
Why is that?
Well, you only have 60 minutes to complete both writing tasks.
That's not a lot of time.
It's not a lot of time,
Yeah.
so we need to be able to plan your essays quickly and write efficiently.
So do you recommend practicing under timed conditions?
Definitely. And make sure you have a system for planning your essays so you don't waste any time trying to figure out what to write.
Okay. So what about the reading section? What are the challenges there?
A lot of people struggle to find the answers quickly in the reading section. The passages can be quite long and complex.
Yeah, they can be tough.
They can. So you need to be able to skim and scan the text effectively to find the information you need.
So are there any specific strategies for doing that?
Yeah, there are. Some people find it helpful to read the questions first and then look for the answers in the text.
Oh, okay.
Other people prefer to skim the text first to get a general idea of what it's about, and then go back and read more carefully when they're answering the questions.
So it depends on your learning style.
It does.
Okay. And the last challenge that we'll talk about is test anxiety.
Ah, yes.
That
Test
one's
anxiety.
okay.
It can really affect your performance.
It really can. Some people just freeze up when they're taking a test.
Yeah, it's tough.
It is.
Yeah.
But there are things you can do to manage your anxiety.
Like what?
First of all, make sure you're familiar with the format of the test.
Right.
So take lots of practice tests.
Yeah.
And practice relaxation techniques like deep breathing.
All right.
And make sure you're getting enough sleep the night before the test.
It's very important.
Very important.
Now, the guide offers a list of tips for acing the IELTS in Canada in 2025. What are a few of the most impactful ones?
Okay, so one of the most important things is to understand the format of the test inside and out. You need to know what to expect in each section, how much time you have, and how the test is scored.
Yeah. So no surprises.
No surprises.
And make sure you choose the right type of IELTS.
Right. Make sure you're taking the academic test if you need it for school, and the general training test if you need it for work or immigration.
That's a good one.
And stay up to date on the latest test requirements in Canada because those can change.
So do your research.
Do your research, yes. And when you're studying, use official IELTS materials
Why is that so important?
because they're the most accurate representation of the real test.
That makes sense.
And take timed mock tests under exam conditions. That'll help you get used to the pressure of the real test.
That's a good tip. And practice your writing skills. Make sure you understand the format of each task and work on developing clear and coherent arguments.
So those essays are important.
They're very important. And don't forget about speaking practice. Get comfortable talking about a variety of topics in English.
So even just casual conversations with friends can help.
Exactly. And build your vocabulary. Learn new words every day and try to use them in your writing and speaking practice.
So it's not just about memorizing words.
It's not. You need to be able to use them effectively.
That's good advice. And what about listening practice?
For listening practice, you can listen to podcasts like those from the BBC and TED Talks and take notes while you're listening to help you remember what you've heard.
Good tip. What about reading?
For reading, you need to be able to skim and scan the text quickly and accurately. So practice those skills with a variety of texts.
And what about time management during the test?
Oh yes, time management. Manage your time wisely during the test. Practice under timed conditions so you know how to pace yourself. And the guide mentions a bonus tip for people who are applying for permanent residence.
Oh, yeah. What is it?
Consider looking into the CELAPIP test.
What's that?
It's another English language proficiency test that's accepted for Canadian immigration.
Oh, interesting.
So you might want to see if that's a better option for you.
So there are other options out there.
There are.
Great to know. Now let's talk about some recent policy changes in Canada and how they affect the IELTS.
Okay.
What are the major changes?
One big change happened to the students' direct stream program, or SDS.
What happened?
Before August 10th, 2023, you needed a minimum of 6 in each band on the IELTS to qualify for SDS.
Okay.
But now you just need an overall score of 6.
Oh, so that's a change.
It's a big change.
So you don't need to get a 6 in every single area.
Nope. As long as your overall score is a 6, you're good.
That's good to know. What about permanent residence applications?
So for some permanent residence applications that are not managed through express entry, the language test requirement has been removed.
Really?
Really. But keep in mind that for express entry applications, you still need to take a language test.
So it depends on what pathway you're using.
It does, it does.
What are some perspectives on these policy changes?
Well, some experts think that changing the SDS program is a good thing. They think that focusing on the overall score gives students more flexibility.
How so?
Well, maybe a student is really strong in 3 areas but a little weaker in 1.
Right.
Under the old rules, that student wouldn't have qualified for SDS.
But now they might.
Exactly.
But are there any concerns about these changes?
Yes, some students and educators are worried that lowering the standards might make it harder for some students to succeed in Canada.
In what way?
Well, if a student's English isn't very strong, they might struggle to understand their classes or participate in discussions,
Right.
and that could affect their academic performance.
That makes sense.
And there are also concerns about increased competition for things like housing and jobs.
Right. If more students are coming to Canada.
Exactly.
So it's a complex issue with pros and cons.
It is.
Has there been any impact on IELTS test-taking patterns since these changes were implemented?
Yeah, there has. Actually, IELTS enrollment has gone down in India since the new SDS policy went into effect.
Wow.
And some test centers in India saw a huge spike in the number of people taking the IELTS right before the policy changed.
So people were trying to get in under the old rules.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
It is. It shows how much of an impact these policy changes can have.
Now, our source includes a case study about someone who prepared for the IELTS. Can you tell us about Ophelia's experience?
Yeah, Ophelia is from Peru, and she wanted to study in Canada. She worked really hard to prepare for the IELTS academic test, and she ended up getting a score that was even higher than she needed.
Wow.
She got accepted into a management course at Lambton College.
That's amazing.
It is. It's a great example of how hard work and dedication can pay off.
Now, just to recap, what exactly is IELTS in Canada?
IELTS in Canada is a standardized English language test. It's used by universities, colleges, and immigration authorities to assess your English skills.
And why do you need to take it?
Well, you need it if you want to study at a Canadian university or college. You might also need it to apply for permanent residence or for certain jobs.
And even beyond those requirements, it just helps you communicate better in Canada.
Exactly. The better your English is, the easier it will be to adjust to life in Canada.
So how could you prepare for the IELTS?
First, familiarize yourself with the test format. Then take lots of practice tests using official materials. Work on building your vocabulary and practice managing your time effectively.
Good advice.
And if you need extra help, consider getting a tutor or enrolling in a coaching program.
So there are options out there for everyone.
There are.
Now, what are some recent trends with IELTS in Canada?
One trend is the growing popularity of the computer-based IELTS test.
Okay.
It's becoming more and more common for people to take the test on a computer instead of on paper.
Why is that?
Well, it's faster and more efficient.
That makes sense.
Another trend is that Canadian schools are continuing to accept the IELTS academic test for both undergraduate and postgraduate programs.
So that hasn't changed.
No, it hasn't. And one thing to watch out for is that IELTS scores for express entry might go up in the future.
Oh, why is that?
Because more and more people are applying for permanent residence in Canada. So the competition is getting tougher.
So you might need a higher score to stand out.
Exactly.
Now, we talked about some common challenges that people face when preparing for the IELTS. Do you have any final advice on how to overcome them?
Yeah. So if you're struggling to speak confidently, just keep practicing. Talk to anyone who will listen to you. Join conversation groups, get a tutor, or even use a language learning app.
Practice makes perfect.
Exactly. And if you're having trouble with time management in the writing section, develop a system for planning your essays and make sure you leave enough time for each task. And if you're having difficulty understanding different accents, just listen to as much English as you can from a variety of sources.
So get out there and immerse yourself.
Exactly.
Our guide also includes some quotes from experts. What did they have to say about the IELTS?
One expert, Robert Wilson, who is a language assessment specialist at the University of Toronto, said that the IELTS is a vital gateway for international students and professionals who want to come to Canada. He said that a good IELTS score not only helps you get a visa, but it also helps you integrate into Canadian society.
So it's about more than just the test itself.
It is. It's about your ability to succeed in Canada.
And what did the other experts say?
The other expert, Emily Carter, who's an immigration consultant, said that while the IELTS is important, it's also important to focus on improving your overall English skills.
Okay.
She said that you shouldn't just focus on learning test-taking strategies.
Right.
You need to actually be able to communicate effectively in English.
That makes sense.
It does. And finally, the guide shares some success stories from LetzStudy, which is an IELTS preparation service.
Oh, yeah. What are some of those stories?
Well, one student, Priya, was really struggling with her writing score, but after she got some coaching from LetzStudy, her score went way up.
Wow.
Yeah, she ended up getting an 8.
That's amazing.
Another student, Arjun, was really nervous about the speaking section.
I can relate to that.
But he took some lessons with LetzStudy and practiced a lot, and he ended up getting a 7.5.
That's a great score.
It is. And another student, Sana, was able to raise her overall score from a 5.5 to a 7 in just 6 weeks.
That's really impressive.
It is. All of these stories show that with the right kind of help, you can achieve your IELTS goals.
So it's possible.
It is.
So what are the key takeaways from this deep dive?
Well, the IELTS is a very important test if you want to study, work, or live in Canada. You need to understand the different types of tests and the score requirements for your specific goals. You need to have a good study plan and use official practice materials. And it's important to stay up to date on the latest policies and trends.
So lots of things to keep in mind.
Lots of things.
Well, as you start thinking about your own journey to Canada, here's something to think about. The way that we assess language proficiency is constantly changing. So what aspect of your Canadian dreams is most dependent on your IELTS score? And what are you going to do to make sure that you get the score you need? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the IELTS in Canada.
Thanks for having me.